Do you yearn for travel that involves outdoor adventure and learning? I do. I also have a passion for all things farming and agriculture. I've traveled to exotic jungles to learn about growing chocolate. I even once owned my own organic vegetable and sunflower farm. And now I'm planning my journey back to agriculture. Agritourism, defined as travel that involves some type of agricultural experience. Agritourism is all about entertaining. But the marketing strategist in me knows that, at its core, agritourism is really about educating, and education affects change. My future farm needs to deliver a profound experience to all of its visitors. It needs to educate people about food, health, and climate. Join me to learn from experienced agritourism farmers and entrepreneurs and help me build my future farm strategy. And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a tropical jungle cutting open cacao pods with a machete, or savoring an outdoor plant-to-plate community dinner with 100 guests at a farm in Illinois. So let's tap into the agritourist in you. The USDA defines food security as having, quote, access at all times to enough food for an active, healthy life for all household members, end of quote. Very low food insecurity is classified as, quote, where one or more household members experience reduced food intake and disrupted eating patterns at times during the year because of limited money or other resources, end of quote. In 2023, the USDA reported national food insecurity at just under 18%. Specific to Massachusetts, in February 2024, 17.9% of Massachusetts households reported food insecurity, with a rate of 22.9% among households with children. SNAP enrollment in Massachusetts has been on the rise, with over 1 million people and over 640,000 households enrolled. SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is Jen Ross, your AgriTourist podcast host. I had the pleasure of speaking with Jennifer Johnson, the Executive Director of Gaining Ground. Located in Concord, Massachusetts, Gaining Ground is located on a few acres of historic farmland. In short, Gaining Ground grows food and gives it away to people who need it, for free. Gaining Ground raises the funding to grow farm fresh vegetables, fruits, and flowers with the help of a paid farm staff and over 3,200 volunteers. They work with different organizations, including shelters, pantries, and meal programs, who use and distribute the food they grow. Join me for an inspiring conversation with Jennifer about how Gaining Ground found her and the evolution of this amazing giving organization that serves the greater Boston area. Hey, Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Good. Very good. Nice to meet you. So so Gaining Ground, you're the executive director. Why don't you tell me a little bit about you first? I want to talk about the current state of affairs and what's going on with the world and how that's impacting who you serve, how the organization got started. I want to talk a little bit about that because you've evolved over the years, and then kind of what's the current state, like what's going on with the organization. So why don't we just start with you first? So tell me about you.
Sure. My name is Jennifer Johnson, and I have the great privilege to be the executive director of Gaining Ground, which is a no-till organic farm in Concord, Massachusetts. Everything that we grow, we donate to people who are experiencing food insecurity. The organization has been around for 35 years, and during that time, we have never sold a single fruit or vegetable. We've donated 100% of everything that we've grown. As I mentioned, the farm is located in Concord, Massachusetts. My family and I live in Concord, and so my first introduction to the farm was actually, we moved to Concord in, I think it was 2012.
Are you from Massachusetts?
No, I lived in the Boston. I went to school in the Boston area, but then moved away, so have kind of lived all over. But we moved to Concord in 2012, I believe it was, and shortly thereafter got introduced to the farm by somebody that we knew who was involved with the organization. So had come out to volunteer. My kids had been here, and my husband and I were modest donors, but it was, something that I was always interested in. My background for the last, I would say, probably 20 years or so has been in nonprofit management and roles ranging from development to communications and moving more into the nonprofit management space. And so a majority of my work has actually been at the intersection of environment and human health. That's sort of where not only my professional but personal interest lies. And when this executive director position became available at Gaining Ground, my thought was, oh my gosh, this is my dream job. Like if I could have written, a job description and more importantly, an organization description for what I'd want to be involved in, this is it. So I've had the great pleasure of being involved here for just shy of 5 years. A little bit of a fun fact about my timing is my first day of work as executive director at Gaining Ground was March 9th, 2020. That was a Monday. And by the end of that week, the world was shut down. So it was a completely different place. At the beginning of that week, there were some rumblings about, I wonder how seriously we need to take this COVID thing. And then by the end of the week, the world had transformed. So I think everybody probably has a unique COVID experience. My unique COVID experience and that of my colleagues is that, we were a form of essential workers. I couldn't, divvy up the farm and send it home with people and tell people, okay,
Yep.
farm home.
Yep.
So we all continued to come to work, and we had the benefit of the fact that our work is primarily outdoors, and we had a lot of space. So that also combined with the fact that now all of a sudden, food insecurity, which hadn't necessarily been, I think, a topic that was getting a lot of airplay in the United States. We associated it mostly with something that happened in other countries. All of a sudden we were seeing, people who were losing their jobs or one missed paycheck as a result of the pandemic. And then there were like cars miles long, at food
Yeah.
pantries needing, people needing food. So it really was, I certainly would not have wished for the pandemic, but one of the things that it did do was sort of, bring the topic of not only food insecurity, but more importantly, nutrition security into more of the common vernacular.
Okay. Before we talk, I want to talk a little bit about the term food insecurity, but before we do that, I want to go back to your first interaction with the farm.
Yeah.
Just tell me about what was that? What was that? I mean, what was that feeling for you? What was the interaction with the farm? And give me that feeling that what happened there for you?
Yeah. So the first interaction with the farm was, and this might even be an amalgamation of memories. I mean, I will say that it, maybe as much as I would have liked to, I remember coming here with my family, but don't necessarily
No, that's okay.
remember. Yeah, it didn't totally etch itself in my mind. So to answer your question, no, I hadn't really had any experience with farms aside from being a consumer and going to farmers markets and then going, apple picking or, some of the traditional, New England activities with my family. I When we moved here, we moved from Connecticut, and I had been working at an environmental education center and nature preschool. So definitely very familiar with outdoors, very comfortable being outside, and the tactile experience of getting my hands dirty. So that was not something new. And it was interesting because at the time that my family moved here, at the place where I worked in Connecticut, which is called the Denison Pequot Seapost Nature Center, and that's in Mystic, Connecticut. We were kind of just beginning discussions about the possibility of starting what they now call the Giving Garden, which was, basically exactly what Gaining Ground does, but on a much smaller scale. growing food for the distinct purpose of giving it away. So when I think part of the reason that the mission of the farm really resonated with me, it was multifold. It was not only it certainly was the aspect of this concept of nutrition security and the firmly believing that sustainably grown healthy nutritious food is a human right, and that it's not just a privilege that should be reserved for people who have ample disposable income or who have easy access to either farmers markets or full service grocery stores. It really is a human right for people to have fresh, healthy food. I mean, that's kind of what's at the core of all human health. And so having that fundamental belief tied in with this notion that although we have certainly, in order to do what we do at Gaining Ground, we need a dedicated and highly skilled staff. We also have a volunteer component, and so it's a matter of getting people outside. We live a lot of screen based. Our lives are so screen based at this point. So another aspect of Gaining Ground's mission is to get people involved in coming out to the farm and getting their hands in the dirt and spending a couple of hours outside, kind of, I would say, I was going to say no matter the weather. I would say almost no matter the weather. Our farmers are out there no matter the weather, but we do take some additional precautions for folks who are not used to spending as much time outside. But it's really, sort of starting to think a little bit about food, our food system, where food comes from, why are certain populations affected by food insecurity more than others, combined with this idea of like, wow, it actually feels really good for my body to be outside interacting with nature and sort of, co-creating with Mother Nature through the act of farming/gardening.
Hey, it's Jen. I need to interrupt this podcast episode to talk about two really important topics: farms and food. This will be quick. Here's the situation. Small farms face increasing expenses. Funding for farms and nonprofits has an uncertain future. Labor shortages and climate change are a constant factor. At the same time, over 10% of our country's population are single seniors living alone. It's impossible for many of these community members to shop at farmers markets and purchase fresh local foods. These community members lose out, and so do the farmers. So when I hear about business models that help both the farmer and the community member alike, I want to spread the word, and I really hope that these models are looked at and replicated. Heart and Soil Collective is a Berkshire-based nonprofit that purchases produce directly from small farms and delivers this produce to local homes at no cost. They are feeding the farmer and they are feeding the community member. On March 15th, Heart and Soil Collective launched a crowdfunding campaign called Locally Grown to Local Homes. This important campaign funds their community produce and soup programs. The goal? To raise $60,000 to pay local farmers for their produce and to deliver to local homes, and also to make soups delivered in the winter. Heart and Soil needs your help. Click on the link in our bio, go to the heartbeatfarms.com website, or check out the podcast notes to contribute to their crowdfunding campaign. And if you can't contribute, then just find a local farm and become a regular customer. We need to stay focused on supporting our local farms and strengthening our regional food systems. Thank you for the listen and enjoy the rest of the podcast episode. Just a quick question. How long ago were you in Connecticut at the other organization?
Yeah, so we lived in Mystic, Connecticut for 5 years. So that would have been like 2007 to 2012, I think.
I think I know the organization you're talking about. Did it have a farmer? Did you guys have a farm at that time, or you were getting a farm?
Property called the Coogan Farm.
I know him, the gentleman who ran that. I actually went up to that farm in 2008 or 9 to visit. And I can't think of his name. He was amazing.
Craig Floyd.
Craig, yes.
Yeah.
And Craig had showed us what they had created, and we were in the
Mhm.
greenhouse or the hoop house, and he was amazing. On such a small piece of property, they really had, done so much. So yeah,
Yeah.
so is that related then?
Yeah,
Okay, it
so
is.
so
That's what I
so
thought.
the Denison Pequot Seapost Nature Center was in the process of purchasing the Coogan Farm land, and although it was called Coogan Farm, at the time it was not
Okay.
a working farm. But one of the things that they did with the property was to turn some of it into this giving garden.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the names all sounded familiar to me. I'm like, wait a second. So yes, there is that connection. Okay, excellent. Now it makes sense. I'm not crazy. I thought I was
Yeah.
like, wait a second. Okay, excellent. So that beautiful property. I mean, they have a beautiful center now for teaching
Yes.
and the kitchen. We were there with the
Yep.
kitchen. It was beautiful.
Yep.
Pretty amazing stuff. I love seeing stuff evolve like that and the
Hmm.
commitment to it. So talk to me about, you have stats on your website. One of the ones, it says as of February 2024, it had said 17.9% of Massachusetts households report food insecurity.
Hmm.
It's a year later.
Yeah.
Has that number changed that you know of?
Yeah, so it has changed. So over the summer, the Greater Boston Food Bank actually came out with a study showing that a third of Massachusetts residents had experienced food insecurity at some point during the previous year. So they might not have been in a, sort of perpetual state, but they had at least had an experience of it. So it really has gone up quite a bit. And it
Okay.
was the, kind of the one-two punch of COVID and combined with pretty rampant inflation, where food prices actually increased on a percentage basis much higher than even the other cost of goods. And in the United States, we have a really trying to think of a polite word to use. A food system that is not the way I would have designed it if I were in charge. So
That's perfect.
so we have a system where calories are cheap, but nutrition is expensive.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of a fallacy that we think that healthy eating is really all about, personal choice. But the truth of the matter is that if people are on limited budgets, their hands are really forced and they're trying to decide what can I afford to buy? Am I going to pay rent and utilities this month, or am I going to buy food for my family? And you walk into the grocery store and they may very reluctantly have to bypass the produce department where you just pick up a bag of grapes and it could end up being $10 or more,
Yeah.
versus going over to the packaged food aisle. And if you get grape flavored fruit snacks or some other thing, it's $2. And so it's a complex system, and it also, I do feel like people are kind of end up by economic necessity choosing foods that are not healthy, foods that are sort of unnaturally cheap because they're filled with corn and soy products and all of the things that get huge government subsidies. Whereas the food that keeps us healthy is does not get subsidized and ends up being
Right.
pretty expensive.
For the purpose of, like, when we're talking about these percentages, the 17.9%, when we're defining food insecurity and doing these studies, how is it defined? Just so
Yeah.
that what is that definition for the purpose of listeners? I don't think we really have defined it, what it really means when we use the term. And now everyone uses the term, and I don't think
Yeah.
we're defining it in a way that's that's really impactful or meaningful. So how would you define food insecurity?
Yeah. So it typically is defined, the definitions that I have seen, and you're right, there does seem to be some nuances to the way that it's defined, but it typically kind of falls somewhere between if a person has had the experience of not knowing for sure that they're going to be able to eat 3 meals a day. That I've seen that as a definition of food insecurity. And then I have also seen one that is a little bit more expansive, does not have food that's necessary for them to live a healthy life is not accessible. So whether that means accessible because it's too expensive or accessible even just like, is this available in my area? I live in the greater Boston area. There are abundant food options near me. But I have family members who live in very rural areas and where the closest grocery store is 45 minutes away. And even and then, sort of the opposite, where if you are, even if you live in a city, depending on what resources are nearby, some of the partners that we work with, they're very underinvested neighborhoods. And so basically they're full of convenience stores and not places that even would have healthy food available. And if somebody would want to purchase that food, based on the infrastructure that exists, it could be, a subway ride and 2 different buses before they could get to a place that sells food that's healthy. So
that's tough. One of the other statistics you had on the website is it says SNAP enrollment in Massachusetts, this was obviously from last year at this time,
yeah.
continues to rise, with over 1 million people and 646,000 households in Massachusetts receiving SNAP. Now, what I think from my other conversations with some other organizations in Massachusetts, you got the SNAP also, isn't the funding for SNAP, hasn't that changed recently? Or I don't know, I don't know what, or the HIP, there's some programs that
Yeah,
you
it's
have.
so that Massachusetts has a HIP program, which is called Healthy Incentive Program.
Yes. Yeah. New York has
And
something similar to that as well.
yeah, and it really was, I'll say certainly from my perspective, a win-win. It essentially kind of doubled the dollars that were available if people were purchasing food from local Massachusetts farmers. So, if they went to a farmer's market or a co-op or something like that, and
Yep.
were able to purchase, so it was good for the Massachusetts, agriculture economy, and it was also good for people who were receiving those benefits because they could buy healthy food that
Yep.
was locally produced and certainly had a better environmental impact for all of us. And so that funding has actually been cut pretty substantially. So it's hurting the producers, and it's also hurting the people who benefited from the program. So at Gaining Ground, we didn't feel the impact of that directly because we don't sell any of our
Right.
foods. Nobody was using those benefits per
Yep.
se, but it's more like, I would say we're sort of a kindred spirit in that desire to see funding reinstated for that program.
So, talk to me about how the organization got started. When did
Yeah.
it start and what happened?
Yeah. So Gaining Ground was the brainchild of a Concord resident, a woman named Jamie Bemis, and her family does actually run an organic farm, a very popular, well-run organic farm in Concord. But she decided that she wanted to start in her front garden what she called a quote soup kitchen garden. And the idea would be that she would grow things. It started with some apple trees, actually, and with the involvement of local school children for them to come over and help tend the trees and help pick the apples, and then eventually a garden and distribute the food to local food pantries. So it's interesting. So Gaining Ground was actually incorporated on April 1st, 1990. So this is the 35th, we're in our 35th
Wow,
anniversary year of our
that's
founding.
great.
Sadly, Jamie Bemis passed away in 2020, so she's not involved with the organization, but it really did start with her. And we wouldn't have existed without her vision for for an organization that had this mission and that was also dedicated to involving the community. So through the years, we evolved from this front yard garden. Eventually, the organization had some space in front of the old manse, which is a property that's now owned by the trustees of reservations here in Concord. And Ralph Waldo Emerson had lived there, and Nathaniel Hawthorne had lived there. As a historic building in town.
Nice. Okay.
So now we are in 2010, I believe it was. We started farming on a parcel on Virginia Road in Concord, and it actually sits on so where my office is, where I'm speaking to you from right now, is a room in the house where Henry David Thoreau was born. I can look. That's the room where
Oh,
he was
wow.
born, right next to my office. And
That's terrific.
the land that sits behind us is land that has been continuously farmed, not only during colonial history times, but certainly pre-colonial history times as well. The land of Concord, it's was originally known as Muscataquid, which means where the grass meets the waters. And so this was the ancestral home of the Nipmuc, Pawtucket, and Massachusetts people. And we know that they enjoyed this area's rich soils and abundant natural resources for, thousands of years before colonists arrived. But,
Wow.
through the history, through colonial history, and then even more history, this land has been continuously farmed and had been an asparagus farm prior to us taking it over. By time Gaining Ground came in, the land was pretty underloved, and it had kind of gone a bit to rack and ruin. The soil was not in good shape, lots of weeds. And so, through the years, we've really embraced it with love. And what that means is we've dedicated ourselves to improving the health of the soil, and do that through no-till farming practices. And now I'm totally biased, but I think that the farm is probably the most beautiful farm that I've ever seen in my life, and is very richly biodiverse, both above and underground.
So tell me about the setting. Give me, explain the setting to me. What's there? What are you growing? Do you have greenhouses? What is the setting? And then we'll talk about the impact of everything you do.
Yeah. So the land itself on Virginia Road, and we've recently started farming a new parcel of land as well. We'll get to that in a minute. But our sort of flagship location here is on a road called Virginia Road in Concord. Like I said, the home where Henry David Thoreau was born sits at faces the road. And then behind us, we've got about 17 acres or so. Of that, we are farming 3.5. We've got 3.5 acres under cultivation. So the rest of the land includes pathways or some buildings, some wetland area. So we've got 3.5 acres under cultivation, and some of that land is open field, where we have our farmers have a very specific system of sort of what, when the cover crop goes in, when the seeds go in, what goes where, what crop follows what. We have 10 what are known as caterpillar tunnels on the property. And so those provide season extension. We are in New England, so we are a 4-season climate, or as I like to say, maybe like a winter, which is the majority of the year, spring, which is about 3 weeks,
especially these days.
Right, and then a pretty decent, a not too bad summer and fall, but winter likes to flex its muscle.
Yes.
So it provides season extension for us, meaning that we can get crops in the ground earlier and keep them in the ground longer. Those structures are they're covered in a plastic, which we take off during the winter months. So right now, you would, if you were here on the farm, you would just see these like, but basically almost would look like an uncovered tent, a
Okay.
large tent.
Yep.
In addition to that, we have 5 hoop houses. So those are structures that are more rigid. So they do stay covered throughout the entire year. They're not heated, but despite the fact that they are not heated, they actually do stay warm enough for us to be able to grow some crops year round. Certainly not the variety or abundance that we do during the summer, but we can grow things like lettuce, kale mixes, spinach, carrots.
So
Yeah,
you're
all
growing in the ground in those hoop
in the
houses.
ground.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
that's great. That's
Yeah,
great.
in
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
hoop house.
we had a hoop house too. So um, it's great when the sun's out in the
Yeah.
winter. But
Yeah.
when that
I mean,
sun's not out.
it's shocking it's shocking how warm it is in those structures,
Yep.
even without any supplemental heat.
Yep, it
Um,
is. It
yeah, I
is.
mean,
That's
it's,
great.
if I'm in there, my job is primarily desk-based, but I do like to schedule myself out on the farm from time to time. So if I have the opportunity to be out and help the farmers, say, do some harvesting or something during the winter, um, I need to dress in layers because those outer layers are coming off. It gets hot in there.
Yes, it does. But it's so nice in the winter to be in there. It really
Yeah,
is.
exactly.
It's a treat.
We just put, thanks to a grant that we got from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we put a brand new, very large greenhouse, propagation house, on the property last year.
Great.
That more than doubled our propagation space. So our old greenhouse still exists. We actually are moving a cool bot structure into there this year because we had sort of maxed out on our greenhouse space as well as our cool storage space. So now we have a new greenhouse and we more than double our cooling space as well.
Excellent. So that's a heated greenhouse?
And yeah, the greenhouse
Okay.
is heated.
Okay, great. Excellent. So you're basically, so the 3.5 acres that you're talking about, is that include the hoop houses where that are you're
Yeah,
growing
so
inside of? Okay.
it includes the bed space that's in the hoop
Okay.
houses.
So that's it. That's, you're doing a lot, like there's this, misconception that you need acres and acres of land to produce so
Right.
much food, but you can be producing on just a few acres, a tremendous amount of food. Obviously, it has to be
Absolutely.
planned out. And you have to respect the soil and rotate and all that, but
Yeah.
you don't need this tremendous amount of land to grow a lot of food, which is what
Yeah, it's
everyone
so
thinks.
we grow between 40 and 50 different crops, varieties of crops each year.
Okay.
We on the Virginia Road property, so the property that's 3.5 acres, we grow sort of just shy of 130,000 pounds of food each year, which is a
Wow.
lot. And that's about 500,000 individual servings of organic fruits and vegetables each year.
That's amazing.
And
Congratulations.
thank you very much. Yeah, and that really is, we're able to do that because of the care and attention that we've paid to the soil. Our transition to no-till agriculture, which is an incredibly climate-friendly way to farm, and really the knowledge and talent of our farm team who plan very carefully what goes where and when, and know how to work in conjunction with the soil so that we can keep it healthy, thereby keeping our vegetables healthy. And also the helping hands that we get from our volunteers. We've got about 3,800 volunteers who come to the farm each year and are involved in some way or another in our mission. A lot of those volunteers are out in the field, but we have people who help with food deliveries, people who line banana boxes. We say that we have volunteer tasks for ages 5 and up, for all ages and abilities.
That's great. So just of the varieties, are you growing vegetables, herbs, flowers? Like, what types of produce are you growing?
Yeah, so all of the above. So we're primarily a vegetable farm. And so we grow a lot of things that are very typical that you would think a vegetable farm would grow.
Yep.
Cucumbers, carrots, spinach, chard,
Yep.
kale,
Cover all the
that type of
seasons.
stuff.
Yep.
But a key cornerstone, because we are growing exclusively for folks who are experiencing food insecurity, is Eastern Massachusetts is a wonderfully diverse and diversifying area. And so a lot of our neighbors who are experiencing food insecurity have ties to other countries or cultures that have varieties of food that we may not be as familiar with. And so our crop plan really is designed to take those preferences into account to make
Excellent.
sure that we can get, because food is about nourishing both body and soul. And we want to make sure that we are providing people with food that they like and that they want to eat. So in addition to the foods that are, very familiar to you and I, that we're also growing varieties of foods that I had never seen or heard of before I came here. So, about 10 or so different varieties of hot peppers, lots of different Asian greens. We grow yucca. We grow ginger and turmeric. I mean, these are types, we grow a Brazilian eggplant called gilo. These are types of foods that are hard to find anyway around around Eastern Massachusetts. And they're basically impossible to find usually at food banks or pantries. And
Yeah.
so, we grow what our partners need. So, for example, we do grow potatoes, but we don't grow a lot of them because our partners have told us, well, potatoes are actually really cheap and we can get them supplied to us pretty abundantly. So that's not
Okay.
what we need. But the leafy greens are incredibly expensive. And so if you are able to provide them to us and we don't have to pay for them, that would be a huge benefit. Or in the case of like, ginger or turmeric or the fresh herbs or the gilo or something like that, they're not getting that from anybody else. And so it's really a blessing that we're able to provide that to them. You had mentioned flowers. We do actually have two different fields of fresh cut flowers on our farm as well. And the purpose for that, first and foremost, was we need the flowers to attract the pollinators, and of course, we want a diversity of life forms both above and below the ground. So the root systems are attracting different kinds of beneficial
Yep.
bacteria and mycelium than different vegetables would be. But then we have these gorgeous flowers that are available to us. So what we do is we also give away free bouquets and cut flowers to, some of our partners are homeless shelters. And so they are serving meals at their location. And so we give them flowers so that they can make bouquets for the tables to serve their clients and guests. One, uh, we have a direct service program for folks in our town that get referred to us by the Council on Aging and by the town social worker. And when they essentially get what would be equivalent to like their free CSA share for the week, we give them a bouquet of flowers as well.
You need some of that beauty.
We do, as humans, we do need beauty in our lives.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. I think that's great. So how many people you have employees? So that
we
I
do.
presume the farmers and some of your key staff. How many key staff do you have? And then obviously you have 3,800 volunteers
Yeah.
coming and going and stuff. So tell me a little bit about the employee structure.
Yeah, so it does range. So we have year-round employees, and then we have seasonal or temporary employees. So on the year-round side, there are three of us in the office, myself. We also have a program manager. She's the one who, kind of coordinates a lot of the volunteer program and works in conjunction with our partners to get the food where it needs to go. And she also is responsible for a lot of the data analysis and collection so that we can determine, so that we know how much food are we growing? Is it more or less? Where is it all
Yeah.
going? We also have a communications and development professional who works with us full time. On the farm side, year round, we have 5 farmers who are working for us year round, which is amazing. Yeah, they're out there today. It is, what is it? Oh, it's 18 degrees outside. I just looked at my watch. If my watch is correct, it's 18 degrees outside. But they are, I believe today's tasks included harvesting spinach and also doing bed prep for radishes that are going in.
Yeah.
And we just started last week. This is the time of year when we do our maple sugaring program. So it
Ah,
turns out we
yes, I saw
actually,
that. Okay.
yeah, so we don't actually have any sugar maples on our property, but we drove around the neighborhood and identified a bunch of nice looking maple trees and sent letters to the homeowners and asked if they would let us tap their trees. And so we make about 40 gallons of maple syrup each year, which is, again, just really a delightful treat for people. Food should be enjoyable. And and certainly maple syrup is a treat, but it also is
Absolutely.
it's full of, iron and other minerals that artificial syrup does not have. And, it's also a way to, acknowledge what our native neighbors did for thousands of years before colonists arrived on the scene. So there's something very, very special about the maple sugaring process.
How was that received by the people that you were targeting their trees on their
Yeah.
property?
I mean, most people were
I think that's
very
great.
happy. It doesn't hurt the tree. And so most people were, glad to have us do it. And we're very thankful for
That's
their
great.
generosity. A few folks weren't interested, and that's fine.
No, but I think that's great because I like that, they're contributing. Like you have people in the community, literally directly contributing. So I thought, that's a great way to reach out and get people engaged in a different way.
Yeah.
That's terrific. That's
Yeah,
really
I would. So
terrific.
the Gaining Ground's tagline is growing food, growing community. And that whole notion of community is something that's really central to our work. Our neighbors and the town of Concord have been very generous and supportive of our
Yeah.
work throughout the decades, from a volunteer standpoint, from just sort of like a moral support or advocacy
Yeah.
standpoint, from letting us tap their trees to financial support. And so it takes a village.
Yep, definitely does, especially this type of organization.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the distribution. So how many partners? I know it said on
Mhm.
your website that you have a waiting list.
Yeah.
How many partners do you support right now?
So throughout the year, we support 16 partners.
Okay.
And then so at the, peak season, so let's say, May through October, each of those partners is getting at least a weekly distribution of food.
Okay.
This time of year, we have one distribution go out per week. And so we really only have enough for one partner. So we kind of rotate through
Okay.
for folks to be able to share
Yeah, no, it's tough.
this
It's a
this
tough
time
time
of
of year.
year. Yeah.
Absolutely. So 16 partners, and just give me a sense of who they are.
Yeah. So our food is typically delivered within 24 hours of harvest and within about 20 miles of the farm. So for folks who are listening to this and may not have a map in front of them, Concord is about 17 miles northwest of the city of Boston. So we are distributing to partners throughout, kind of closer out to where we are here in Concord, in several different neighborhoods in the city. There's another city to the north of us that's called Lowell, which is one of the larger cities in Massachusetts. And our partners include a variety of different organizations. So some of them are what you would think of as very typical food pantries. So, these are places where, think of it as like a free grocery store where folks are able to go in and, get the food that they need. We're a supplier, or in some cases, the only supplier of fresh vegetables for the food pantry. Other cases, our partners that we have are meal programs. So these, that could take the form of, I had mentioned before, the folks who are unhoused. And so they may be going to a day or an overnight shelter for meals. And so we're supplying food to the kitchens so that the kitchens can make those hot, nutritious meals.
Perfect.
Some of our partners also are doing home delivery of prepared meals. So people may either not have the capacity or ability to cook for themselves. And so the partners are delivering meals. There are a few preschools and one elementary school that we are delivering to as well that also have kitchens. So they're able to take our food and incorporate it into homemade meals.
Excellent. Excellent. So let's talk funding.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's probably the toughest and most critical and primary part of your job.
Yes.
As someone told me on a recent interview, a gentleman I interviewed in South Carolina who runs not the same type of organization, but the same essence of what you guys do for a different purpose. That's what keeps him up at night.
Yeah.
So, especially right now, I'm sure there's different types of concerns coming up. So where is the funding coming from to run this? Because you're not selling, you don't have a CSA, you don't have
Right.
something that's actually bringing in income to fund all that you're doing, all the amazing work that you're doing, the impactful work you're doing. So talk to me about where is this funding coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. So our budget this year is just over $1.2 million.
Wow.
And we get about 60% of our funding from individuals. And that ranges from
Wow.
and that
Okay.
ranges from people who give $10, per year up to people who are giving, five figures. We also get about 40% of our funding from grants and companies. So these would be community foundations or, other types of foundations where we submit a grant application. Companies who have philanthropic arms to their organizations, we can, we can tap into some of the funding sources that they have. I will say we do not get we do not get regular funding from the government, either state or federal. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has been very generous over the last few years in funding some of our infrastructure needs that we have. So there's a program that they have that's through the state that's called the Food Security Infrastructure Grant. And so they have funded some wash station improvements. They funded the construction of our most recent greenhouse, as well as the one of the hoop houses that we have. So that's very project specific funding. And in the past, the Natural Resources Conservation Service they funded our well. Not sure if they did anything else, but there's been obviously a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks about funding freezes and organizations that have had their budgets, annihilated, basically. We are not in that direct position because we don't get our funding directly from the government. But if you're speaking about what keeps me up at night, I do think about just the increased need across the board. Now, if organizations doing very worthwhile work are not, if they are not receiving their government grants, private donors will be stepping in to help, and that there may not perhaps be quite enough to go around to all the different organizations that
Yeah.
those particular donors have supported in the past.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Yeah, there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
So going forward, what is your vision, over I guess the shorter timeline? Will it take 1 or 2 years? Like, are there things that you want to do or impact or change, going forward? Like what's kind of top of mind for you outside of the funding piece, which I'm
Yeah.
sure is constantly top of mind in this type of role?
Yeah. So last year we had the biggest expansion that we've ever had in our organization's history. We were able to license 5 acres of land in a nearby the Minuteman National Historical Park.
Okay.
So we have a 5-year rollout plan of what we hope to do with that land, and we brought a little less than an acre sort of online last year, and we were able to grow about 10,000 pounds over there. So
Wow.
certainly we have this plan to take us through the next few years to pretty dramatically increase our production. Um, and it's multifold. So it is all about healing that land as well, which has been, that the organic matter of the soil on that land is about 2%. Ideal organic matter percentages for soil would, range anywhere from say like 8 to 10%, which is what we've got for the most part over here at Virginia Road now after many, many years of spending a lot of
Yeah.
time and money on compost and restoring soil health. So this is sort of step one of the expansion, which is about growing more food, certainly. But then there's also this notion of, really every farmer in the United States, in the world for that matter, really needs to be learning how to grow in a way that is regenerative and climate friendly. We're already have seen the degradation of the big farms in the Midwest where, soil practically doesn't even exist anymore. It's more just, dirt that requires a whole bunch of chemicals in it for anything to grow, which kind of continues to perpetuate a bad cycle. And so we really would like to to take what we're doing and have it be like a learning classroom for people who are interested in wanting to learn how to farm using this method of agriculture, this no-till style. And so we do have an internship program that is planned this year that we hope to be able to hire some college students who would get funding from their colleges to come and work with us this
Great.
summer. That would be a precursor for perhaps a more formalized apprenticeship program, which we hope to start in the next year or two. And we know that it is possible in this style of agriculture, although we're not selling food, we have alums, if you will. So some of our former farmers who have gone off to purchase or lease their, land of their own, and they're making a living doing this. And so, and that's creating more food for their communities. That's healing
Yep.
land in their communities. And so we do see that as a way that we can continue on with our core mission, but have some greater impact at the same time.
Excellent. That's terrific. Do you find people interested in getting into farming?
Yeah,
Is it a trend that you're seeing, especially, once they come to your farm, there's that connection, so I'm
yeah,
sure some of these people want to take it to the next level.
right.
So are you seeing more of that as you see people kind of coming through the farm?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of young people who are interested in getting into farming, which is really encouraging. Certainly it is a lifestyle choice that people are making. Like many professions, you don't go into farming to get rich, but a lot of people think of it as a vocational calling.
Yep.
And there certainly is a way to do it so that you can, have a healthy life, take care of your body, not be worried about the chemicals that are, going into the ground and, affecting you or your
Yep.
family. And there actually have been, I'm forgetting, I think even on NPR within the last year, they did an interview just sort of citing the number of young people who are interested in agriculture careers.
Yep. Yep. And some of us older people too.
Yeah.
Second
Yeah.
careers.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So I have to ask you, in your bio, it says that outside of work, you most likely find her making soup,
Yeah.
sharing her love of Dolly Parton, or
Yeah.
sitting around a campfire with friends and family. So the soup part, is
Yeah.
that from vegetables at the farm?
So actually, the soup part has a really interesting backstory. I love soup, mostly because I don't like, everything's ready at once, everything goes in the same pan, so it's more efficient to
It
make in the
is.
kitchen. So when I lived in Connecticut, I had a friend who organized a soup swap. And it was great fun. And, we'd get together and it was a way to kind of, to meet folks, and then you go home with lots of good soup. So when we moved to when we moved to Concord, I've moved around a lot during my life. And after kind of the initial shock of realizing that I'm going to have to adapt to a new place, I try to embody the notion of bloom where you're planted. And so it wasn't that long after we had moved here, and I just decided that I was going to do a soup swap of my own and invite everybody that I knew in Concord, which was not that many people at the time. So it was a little bit like, hey, I talked to you one time at a school function. You want to come to this soup swap? Um, so we,
I love it though. It's great.
so I just did the 14th annual Concord Soup Swap in January at
Wow.
my house and it's become great fun, people tell me that they look forward to it every year. And then we started doing that at Gaining Ground as well. So we had our fourth annual soup swap, I think it was earlier this month. So
So
yeah.
what
So
happens at the soup swap?
everybody brings uh, five quarts, like individual 1 quart containers,
Okay.
five, all of the same soup. And I make up fun games and activities, and that kind of determines how we trade the soup. So you bring five of the same, you go home with five different. Along the way, there's been a lot of laughs. We enjoy each other's company. You get to learn things about people, and then you've got a freezer full of lunches for the next few weeks.
Excellent. I love it.
Yeah.
And Dolly Parton?
Dolly Parton, yeah, I do have to say, I know she's like a cultural icon now, but I feel like I've been a Dolly Parton fan for a long time. And I think who doesn't love Dolly? Her music is she's an incredibly talented songwriter, singer, performer, businesswoman, philanthropist, and frankly
Yeah.
human. And
Yes.
so she is a big tent kind of person. She wants to surround people with love, and she wants people to take care of each other. And if she sees something that she thinks that she can fix, she steps in and fixes it. So, yeah, aspire to be like Dolly.
Excellent. So just to sum up, so if I wanted to get involved in your organization,
Mhm.
what do I do? Do I go to your website? How do I get involved? What do I need to go through to get involved? How do I help make an impact?
Absolutely. Great question. So first and foremost, yeah, go to our website and you can click on the volunteering information. So our volunteer calendar is now open for the summer slots that we have. And that is a great way to come and get to learn a little bit about the farm. Our farm also does have, an open door policy in terms of visits, not for volunteers. We don't do drop-in volunteers. But if folks just want to come and take a look around to see what we're going on, we always love to have visitors. And there are a couple of things that we do during the course of the year to kind of encourage those visitors. So in April, we solicit poetry submissions from community members, and then we put poetry up around the farm, interspersed with information about regenerative farming and food insecurity. So you can read poetry and learn at the same time while also seeing the farm and the crops. And then in the fall, we do the same thing, but with photography.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so
That's great. Great way to
those are,
integrate art and agriculture.
yeah, exactly. And then, of course, as you mentioned before, our work really is we fund our mission with money. So if folks are in a position where they're able to make that kind of a contribution, that is always welcome, and no amount is too small or too large. And that information can also be found on our website.
Excellent. Jennifer, it's been a pleasure. Everything you're doing, it's pretty amazing. And it's pretty amazing that your group is not, you're not selling to fund, you're completely focused on growing to give.
Yeah.
And how you're giving and who you're giving to is obviously having a significant impact on the community. So thank you for everything you do and for everything your team does, your extended team of volunteers as well.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you. And I don't know if you ever find your way up in this area, but would absolutely love to give you a tour if you are.
I absolutely will find my way.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and interest.
All right. Bye
Take
bye.
care. Bye-bye.
I hope our Agritourist podcast prompts you to think more about where your food comes from, whether it be your vegetables, fruits, meats, and even those sweet treats. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone you think may truly benefit from or be inspired by it. Visit us at agra-tourist.com. Until next time. So I was recently listening to one of the Grounded in Maine podcasts produced by Amy Fagan. The podcast is an open conversation about being mindful about how we show up in the world. It's focused on sustainability and how sustainability impacts every part of our life. What are some of the most important takeaways that people will get from your podcast?
One of the things that I hope that people will take away from the podcast is encouragement. Like, I want them to not feel like you have to spend thousands of dollars to be part of the solution, because, there are a lot of sustainable, things that say sustainability or sustainable, like solar panels or organic cotton and stuff like that. Like, some things are just more expensive because they have that tagline, that phrase or whatever. But there are so many ways that you can be sustainable. You just have to be a little bit creative. And so I'm putting out all these ideas that what people are doing, just to put the thought out there that we can all be part of it without going broke.
So how can people find your podcast?
My podcast is wherever podcasts are found. It is just called Grounded in Maine. I also have my Instagram is where I am most active, and the Instagram handle is Grounded in Maine Podcasts.